everyone, welcome. Hello, this is Zeynep Nur Ayanoğlu. I'm a translator and cultural entrepreneur, and I've recently joined PASAJ as a member. We host Julia Upmeyer and Pritchard today as part of Small Things Studio Residency, which is a program run by PASAJ. So I think we will start with how do you know each other?
We met in 2019. Julie was hosting an open house exhibition where she invited about 70 artists, and the heading of Sui Generis, the possibilities of a house. And her open call came up, and it was an immediate feel for what she was asking. And I was very lucky to be one of those 70 artists exhibiting, and that's how I met Julie for the first time.
And I continued to do 2 more exhibitions in the empty house. Our house is still in the process of planning permissions, which infinitely extended outwards in time. So when time gets extended, I have to fill it with something, because if it's an empty space, which to me is completely irresistible, and because somehow we did come to own this space, no one was telling me no, and we didn't have to ask anybody, because you could ask yourself, and I would always say yes. So it was quite a free situation. So Mary Rose was actually a part of the 2nd and the 3rd show, and we became friends, and our families overlapped, and we wanted to do something together.
Yeah, where is it located, the house, the open space?
In the open space. It's outside of a small village called Quarrying, on an island called Inismon, or Anglesey, in the very northwest of Wales. So it's kind of the last stop to Dublin, from London through all of England, through North Wales. So there's kind of a historical trade route.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's the connection, you have to go onto the island to then jump off of the UK into Ireland.
And do you live there too, or you just saw the open call and you connected that way?
Well, the open call was lucky that it was just on the opposite side from where I live and down the coast. So we are about 12 miles apart, but we could be, 100 miles apart. How the road system is, how the whole geographic sense is. And I live in Carnarvon, which is a slightly bigger town to what Julie lives in, complete with a castle and shops and straight water, all the complements of rural life at the foothills of Snowdon.
Great. How are you inspired by limestone as a material?
We stumbled into limestone, which has been fun, because neither of us come from a geology background, although, I'm overly fascinated by rocks on a beach, but that's kind of a normal thing to do when you're on a beach. When we wanted to do an exhibition together, one of the only chances at that time to have a whole space to occupy instead of being one part of a group show was a network that we were both a part of called Carn, which is located in Carnarvon, and their space is very small, but directly, in a very Istanbul spatial sense, across from the walls of Carnarvon Castle.
Mm-hmm.
So
and there are streets?
Yeah, just really so to us, this was something that we had to think about, that we had to deal with in the idea for the exhibition. And we wanted to work collaboratively, we wanted to develop something new, and this was physically like a jump off point. I just moved to North Wales 5 years ago.
From Istanbul?
From Istanbul.
Yeah.
So a lot of the same visual sensations of very close, very vertical spaces were reenacted in that street. When I don't get that sense where I live in the small village, which is more like farming and sheep and very stereotypical Welsh things.
And you, what do you think about the spatial encounter with limestone across a narrow street?
Well, as a Maltese native, narrow streets are part of the whole structure of the towns that I grew up in, aside from the fact that all the buildings are made out of the Maltese limestone. But in Carnarvon, I live within the town wall, so my outside wall is part of the castle structure. The streets as such are very much what's outside my front door. So we are in a very close community in a very strict linear street map, just behind where the gallery is.
So it feels quite natural to you to work with limestone, right? Or no?
Yes and no, but I wouldn't say that I knew as much about limestone or thought about it as much as now that we are really working with it.
Of course. But what have you produced so far?
Well, our initial proposal for the show got completely caught up in lockdown. So we proposed it, we got the commission to do the show.
Yeah.
And we had just started, and then we weren't allowed to see each other basically for a year and a half, really. Even though we were so close, because we weren't allowed to go beyond 5 miles of our individual houses. So we're not in each other's circular bubble. But before that time, we were thinking about the wall and learned that it was made of limestone. So instead of kind of researching it as an academic, our first instinct was to go to a quarry. Like, where did this come from? Where did this come from? And we found a quarry on the last working quarry on Anglesey, on our island, and we just kind of went there.
The last working quarry?
Well, of limestone.
Of limestone.
Yeah.
So all along the coast, there used to be 6 or 7 quarries, limestone quarries. High producing, super high quality. So it was carboniferous limestone, which is really hard, dense, excellent building material. Very hard. It was even called Anglesey marble, although it
Before
wasn't.
then, were you aware of that
No.
thing going on
No.
there?
No,
It's a
no.
huge production line, and you were
Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
The castle for me is something that you walk past every day, you know, so it becomes a little bit you don't think about it. But certainly going to the quarry was a totally different experience. Besides the fact of knowing that all this limestone was being shipped from Anglesey across the UK into Europe. The quarry that we visited is still having commissions to extricate X amount of limestone to be taken to mid-UK, South UK. So it is a very active quarry. It's a 2-man quarry. Only 2 people work there.
Only 2.
Only 2. They only get people in.
Plus you 2, it makes
Oh, we really enjoyed ourselves.
Yeah, we had a really, he was so nice, and he just left us alone completely. One day he even forgot we were there and almost locked the door. So we would go, in the morning, goodbye dear, off to the quarry, and go. And we were working in different parts, because he was very much working in the big blade, the cutting section, and we were just playing in there's a waste area, which is the limestone dust, limestone powder, that they pool it and then scoop it out into this mountain and this kind of moonscape, and this very fine, almost porcelain-like material was what had completely captivated us and brought us back.
It is
Time
shiny,
after
right?
time.
It's
so dry.
It's not shiny, yeah. It's like really fine, almost finer than talcum powder. The ideal powder to make very fine paint from, as if you're going to mix up zinc white. Or, yeah, more like, yeah, zinc white, because I think it is a little bit transparent. And it hangs about. You can't get rid of it. And it travels with you, you know, and bizarrely, a powder that you can dust off will sink into the surface of the tarmac or your front doorstep or your clothes, and you can't move it, as we've experienced.
Yeah, your performance suits come from there, from Quarrying, right? Or did you design them? It was something that you saw there, or
No, that was
the red
yeah, it was an aesthetic
suits?
choice.
Uh-huh.
We were planning our first performance and we wanted something that made us stand out from the landscape,
Uh-huh.
to deliberate our actions, and also, I mean, uniforms are really powerful. When you put a uniform on, you become someone else and you become part of the project. So for us, when we put that on, especially with the kind of carrying cases that Mary Rose made for us, it really is like a transformation. Like, okay, we're working now, we're carrying, we're feeling the weight in our body, and it's kind of a transformation.
And you also passed the stones. You Mary Rose, give it to her in the video. Can you talk about it? You transform the weight from your body to hers, and then she drops the stone on the ground.
And vice versa. So we share that action. The action itself could be seen as a mirror image of this transference of material from the quarry itself. Everything has to go in stages, you know, from one place to another, and then that moves onto another staging. So there is a path that these stones take, whether it's the builder, the maker, or the transport itself. And when we went for a visit to the quarry here, that procession of trucks that was non-stop, consistently bypassing each other, laden and empty, a whole procession. We called it a concert, and it felt like a concert of trucks, up, down, mirroring a ballet. Felt very choreographed.
Do you have anything to add?
And it was that super industrialized, super planned choreography that inspired our actions here, with the staircase. It's so beautiful in this building. So before, like, we had been to the quarry, and it was very much like okay, these two people and that, and we had a lot of space, and this was at a totally different level. And we were very aware that if you take something, it creates a void, and then needs to be piled up. So that's where the vertical really struck us, because the landscape was so transformed. It was relatively flat, and then suddenly it just went whoosh. And this building is very vertical, especially if you're coming in and going right to the PASAJ space. It's really like with this zigzag pattern. So all of those came together for the performance here.
Now I've got an ambitious question. What have you learned from limestone as a material, as an artist?
Oh, it's a good one.
From a poetic sense of aesthetic, you know, just putting aside the different colours and the different compactness of the material, the limestone really has become quite familiar. It has become, you know, feel quite possessive about it, and yet it has So in some respects it's made me feel that I can covet it, but it's very much its own thing. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I've had a flipping sense of preciousness and just commonplace. Because the limestone that we encountered first was the Carboniferous limestone, which came from this tropical, very watery world of layered animals, and you'll see a lot of fossils, and then it was compressed and waiting for 300 million years. I mean, the more you understand about the segmentation of deep time, which I still don't understand 300 million years. I can't even understand a million years.
I think about 20th century.
Exactly. So when you start to imagine worlds that are just so different from how the Earth is now, it's almost like a reverence. Like, this is 300 million years old. Like, just treasure this. But yet, limestone is actually pretty common all over. And then the different uses of it also kind of makes me feel different ways as well. Like, if you're taking this to use as a building material and building something amazing out of it, and then you get like all these moral ideas too. Like, is that morally a good use for 300 million year old thing? Like, okay, yes, because you're using it as it is. But if you get into the world of aggregates and you're just like blowing this up and crunching it up and putting it underneath kilometers of road, then, I mean, I don't know if you can apply morality to these things, but for me, that's not really very nice to this amazing 300 million year old material. So like, how are we treating these different materials? What are we using it for? How much is there? And then we start thinking very much about the future as well. We had a really interesting conversation with, what was she? Futurist.
Yeah.
So she was,
Futurist?
I made that up maybe, but she
A
thinks a
scientist?
lot about like, okay, deep time, deep future,
Okay.
far future, big
Hyper.
future. Sorry?
Hyper.
Hyperfuture, great, love it. You have hyper objects, hyperfuture. So like, what materials will there be in the future, and how will our rubbish, little bits of stuff recompress themselves? So when you start thinking about that, like, your mind just, you can only get conceptual about it.
Yeah.
And then like, okay, this will get squished down next to a little bit of like, of some earth mineral that we extracted from over here. Like, what will these next materials be? Yeah. So it's just fun to think about time. So limestone has taught me about time.
Great. Can you tell me about some limitations about working with such a material that you weren't aware of before? The weight, for example, like maybe how it's difficult to carry it with you, for example, from Wales to Turkey.
Yeah, well, every stumbling block informs the next step. So we knew we were not going to be able to bring limestone dust, which was essentially what we were enjoying using up until just a few months ago. And the whole concept of bringing that with us was clearly one on the time scale not going to happen. So then you have to think of what you can find. So if it's just what you can find, then it does come down to what you have to carry it in.
Yeah.
How are you going to bring it? How much? How many trips are you going to make?
Budget maybe, or
The
machinery.
The budget, yeah, absolutely. Machinery. But we were, we had the blessings of a shopping trolley, a couple of shopping bags, people who turned the other way and didn't see what we were doing, and we just went around and picked up stones from just round the corner and down the road, and you just make do, because we weren't going to get stone from the quarry here. We didn't really have enough time to liaise with the quarry people. Next time, we don't know. But I think every little thing informs what you do with it in the end. And I think I'm personally quite grateful that we had to work like this, and we work very well when it comes to working with what you can. At home, it was a totally different scenario. We were to our limit carrying big boulders of limestone. Carrying what we could physically carry together between us that, you know, flattened your car, basically.
Do you have anything to add, or?
Yeah, I think the weight aspect has been most interesting, which makes you appreciate what industrial actions has done to the world. Because at the Welsh quarry, at our quarry, we found a video of him quarrying in the traditional way, about drilling holes and then kind of like breaking the rock,
Just like that.
but it was
It's just beautiful.
it's before a dynamite sort of situation, so you can appreciate how the extraction and the general like use of world materials has just exponentially multiplied with like steam trucks and steam engines and then diesel and then all these other things, how much that multiplies a single person's action. So when we were brought back down to, when we encountered like a giant mountain of limestone offcuts, we're like, oh yeah, that'll be great for our exhibition.
Well, he said take what you
He's
want.
like, take what you want. And we're like, oh, free, amazing material.
Take what
Thank
you
you.
can.
But then we had one car, and we're like, how much does a car carry? And we were like Googling the weight load of my car. But then how do you weigh things? Like, okay, maybe the manual said 1.2 tons. What is a ton? You know, all these really things. So we had to make rules for ourselves. Like either we have 2-person rocks or 1-person rocks. And then, but out of
Good labeling.
yeah, and out of that started to come our own vocabulary as well. So because we were kind of setting rules, the rules had names. And because it was a collaboration, we had to communicate things we discovered in a quick and fun way amongst ourselves. So the project has also kind of inspired new ways of using words and thinking about what, you know, quarry people would do the same, because they spend their days saying, oh, do they have different names for like different shapes of rocks, or like kind of a lesser quality rock and nicknames for that? And of course they do. So you kind of discover these lovely things.
Now that you've mentioned your lingo, let's talk about the project title, Void Fraction. What does it mean?
I like finding these words. It's a scientific measurement of the porosity of a material. So it's a number. So the void fraction of limestone is anywhere between like 0.5 and 1.9 or 1.2. You know, it's a gradation, and each stone or each material would have a different void fraction. So the porosity of the material, which is related to permeability, which is why, and it just sounds cool. So
Gözeneklilik ve geçirgenlik meseleleri. Just wanted to say it in Turkish.
Thank you. It's nice. So we just kept using that because the initial exhibition was about the permeability of walls, limestone walls in the case of Knobbing Castle, because you build these walls, you create an interior space and an exterior space, us and them, and strong material, and then you build a big door in it,
Yeah.
and a window, and then you need stuff, so you need to leave, and then you have to come back in, and
it's also right on the water, right
Yeah.
on the water's edge, open to really extreme elements, sand, sea, air, everything, surrounded by water itself with its moat. Yeah, and like you say, big windows.
The castle wants to keep people out, but the sun
Yeah.
shines like
And air.
and sea.
yeah. So our first idea for the exhibition, which we didn't do, and it changed completely over the 2 years of lockdown, was connecting the air of the gallery and the air of the castle through these like tubes. So maybe someday.
One day, when they'll let us in.
When they'll let us.
And what are you planning to do here in Istanbul, and what have you done so far? I know that you filmed a video performance, and what else? You've carried stones, obviously.
Well, I think the nicest thing about being in Istanbul with the concept of limestone is discovering the story of the city walls. We walk the length of the city walls, and the sort of different, not only just the architecture of the actual walls themselves, the differences in treatment when you come to a wall that's fallen, how do you put it back, and how different people commissioned to restore the walls treated that concept of restoration. So then you start thinking about the packing and the usage of what you find or what you replace it with.
So the main material of city walls is limestone.
And
Yeah.
brick.
And brick.
The stripes. And it's so just frightening. It's so similar to Canaan Castle.
Yeah.
I posted a photo from our city walk, and 3 of my neighbours in Wales said, "Oh, it really is like Canaan Castle."
Yeah.
So we were loosely coming to feel the similarities or the differences between the Istanbul city walls and Canaan Castle, because the banding is the same. These stripes that you experience all along the walls.
Here it's red, there it's grey. It's just a different type of limestone. But what fascinates me about Carnarvon Castle is the way that through the centuries people have taken parts of it away and built houses in place of where the stone was, where the wall was. And now the houses have gone and it's just empty, and now we're going to keep it empty. But people talk about the people who were born there and grew up in these houses that were a replacement of the wall, and this sort of, and maybe this is where the to and fro, there's an awful lot of this through history,
The exchange
to you,
between-
exchange, this sort of changeover of usage, aside of where on earth have those stones gone? Where are they? Yeah.
Which leads us to our next question. How can you compare and contrast your practice in Wales and here in Turkey? I know it's a big, ambitious project to compare these countries as if you represent Wales and we represent here in Turkey, but in terms of your specific project, what are the commonalities, maybe?
I felt like, because we've been working together for a certain number of years, that we were able to bring with us our curiosity, our ability to spot interesting things immediately, and also having a vocabulary and a parallel sense of aesthetic, that we can make decisions easily. So although we didn't have our limestone powder, which was kind of our basic thing, we were able to continue the voice of the project, not using limestone powder So, I mean, that was really fun, actually, to know that the project wasn't dependent on limestone powder.
I know. Limestone itself is also something else, another story that you can
Yeah.
follow the traces of.
Yeah.
So it was kind of freeing,
Yeah.
although I really want limestone powder back. I miss it, sort of, making art without it.
You
Seems
even
kind
make
of-
me feel I'm missing it.
But it was
So
good to
passionate
know.
about it.
It was just good to know that
Yeah.
we can kind of do anything anywhere, because we had nothing, and we did everything that we did basically in 2 days. So it was nice to just kind of, oh, we'll have that table. Oh, we'll find some rocks.
Proactive.
Like
Yes.
really scavenging and then making something that fit within the conceptual framework of our project, just kind of from what we had. It was really satisfying.
And it remains a very experimental framework.
Yeah.
So everything that we've done all along feels that we're very easy with each other, and we're very happy to experiment and allow these new nuances to take form, which is what is so rewarding. You know, it pushes you
Of course.
onto the next thing. So when whatever the next scenario is, will no doubt be another experiment.
So, do you have any idea what can be next? Here or back in your hometown?
There's things on the horizon.
Yeah.
We've initiated a series of kind of durational land art interventions, like in a patch of land at my house. So that
The globe.
the globe thing, and then a really large, none of the photographs really explain it, a
They
really
don't-
large
they don't express
dome
the-
in the ground.
Actually, when I
Yeah.
saw the photograph of the globe, I thought it was so huge that people could actually enter inside.
Excellent.
And I was fascinated because it was like a whole different world which you created, and I wanted to be inside.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That would be lovely.
That would-
Maybe the power of the photographing process as well.
Mm.
And it's the initial idea. Let's try this, and perhaps it will do X, and yet you try it and it does Z. So you know, you don't know. So the whole could be 3 times as big and 3 times as deep, which the whole was inspired by the notion of the cisterns and holding water. This feeling that there is something underneath holding water, and water and limestone dust are such a happy match. But it might not work, you know, but that was the whole feel of it. And then just watching limestone dust in water just do what it does. Move, melt, twist with whatever animal was moving inside it, you know. Yeah.
The best thing about working with a material is it demands that you be there. It demands your presence. You only understand it if you're there, and if you're not there, you only see a photograph and some part of it is missing.
Yeah. That's been fun too, though. That's something that I think we kind of started communicating over lockdown, kind of through graphic play on Instagram, which is easy to play and kind of be really playful with bits of objects and materials. So I think the possibilities of this very small but infinite possibilities of Instagram in particular hasn't helped to form this kind of shared aesthetic of the project, because we think of Instagram as like a completely different projection. It's not a documentation of what's happening, because it's very much about experiencing it firsthand, but it's a whole nother way of, it's whole nother part of the project. Like your film
see it as
exists
a-
on its own, in its own space.
Concepts for short viewing. I suppose it's like witnessing somebody's sketchbook. You know, it's a process of thinking.
Of course. Now that you've mentioned small and infinite possibilities, shall we close with a reference to PASAJ's Small Things Studio Residency and your collaboration speak to each other in terms of being small? What do you think about this word small? Thinking about deep past and hyper future?
I think small is kind of the same as really big.
Yeah.
So if you try to be small, then it's like a fractal. It just kind of, like, you can try, but for us, it's more like we do things within our physical time capabilities, which is, I mean, arguably small, but it's never turns out small. It always like opens up 5 more things, so it's more like a loop with the idea of small in a loop somewhere, but you don't need much, and then it kind of bursts out again.
The initial falling in love with this limestone dust mountain was immediate. It was massive, it was sculptural, and it was its own thing. But then when you took a clump out of it, which you held in your hand, and you're able to split it and really appreciate the finite texture inside, that was a total different dimension.
Is it sandy? How does it feel?
It's very smooth, and yet you can pull it apart and almost look at the layering of the colours as it's being piled on. But itself, it can be wet, it can be clammy, it can be dry, it can be hard, you can break it, unlike the stone. Yeah.
But it does want to kind of become stone again, so it tends to like compress itself. You get this powder, you can even sand it down, grind it down, but then if you just leave it, it kind of compresses itself back again. It's fragile, there's no like nothing binding it, but it gets,
Interesting.
which is a lot, like, you know, you, as an artist in residence, you come and experience a certain sequence of things, which viewed in isolation is small, but everything you've experienced up in your life is a part of that, and then that is now a part of your entire future as well. So no matter how short the residency is, there's bits of that that then inform things decades in the future. So the small is big, it becomes big again. Yeah.
Extended thinking.
Extended thinking.
I think we're good. Thank you, dear Julie and Marie-Rose. If you have questions, we can have them.
Please.
Questions or comments? Please.
Queries in general have been always political in Turkey because of the extraction of marble on the Marmara Islands. So it's not that it's only shipped to Europe, but because of work safety reasons and the monopoly behind it. So did you manage to discover any of those kind of things on your trips to there and here, maybe by researching? So that's what I wanted to ask.
A bit. We went out to Çebeci. So in talking to the people in the coffee house there, we found a lot of kind of very localized politics, which were actually not national politics, of that there used to be 3 quarries there. It was very noisy, it was very dusty. The people didn't want it. They actually succeeded in getting 2 of the quarries closed. The 3rd one was still going and it was closing. And then the government kind of said, nope, we're gonna take this here. So a whole nother wave of it started. So it was interesting for us to see that very micro, very macro situation combine in this physical space. Because the kahvehane was literally like this big with these two beautiful trees. So you were in this just like cool bubble, but all around you, the dust you could see there, the lorries you could hear behind you. So it was a really frightening, disturbing, physical summary of this tiny village and these people who had lived there, and then this kind of macro bubble of this very top-down, we're taking this, which then when we understood the lorry parade, we were like, oh, okay, this is even another level. This wasn't even the kind of network of the 8 companies that were working there. This is really like boom. So there's always, and the limestone especially always exists in these karst landscapes that are, you know, arguably one of the most beautiful natural foundation. Like, it's an amazing landscape. Like, an undisturbed limestone landscape is unbelievably beautiful. And we've read a bit about some of the, like the men dips in the UK and these conflicts of interest between the need for aggregate, the need for material, the need for nature, the local people, the big companies, the governments. So it's an impossible sort of scenario.
It's like a puzzle. And I can also add to this that the fine art students, especially sculptures, don't get any of the limestones or the marbles in general. I mean, so there's another layer of preventing archivation.
No. Yeah. Are you a printmaker?
No, I used to be a sculptor, but that's
Okay.
why I'm kind of into the economic politics of the marble. So
Sure.
that's why I wanted to ask. Thanks for your answer.
Yeah. It's.
I think
You get back to the moral, like, is that a good use for it? Like, I would say yes. Like, you're honoring the material, making a sculpture out of it. So, yeah,
we had a really,
no answer.
we had a really privileged start though in Anglesey. I mean, the whole experience on Anglesey, on the island where Julie lives and where the quarry is, because it was such a home industry. You know, you had 2 guys who clearly knew each other very well. They both moved independently or together, and it seemed very passive. We were never there when they were dynamiting the quarry or having to break up the stones, or actually not even there when the trucks were moving. So to then come to the big open landscape here, which was the biggest quarry that I've been in, I don't know about you, but even compared to the quarries that I've seen in Malta, it was so dramatic. You asked about health and safety and the way people are treated and everything. There's clearly very different ways that other people manage this clawing of resource out of the land. And I have seen some really dramatic things happen where people are literally in the path of falling rocks. You know, I mean, rocks make it sound like this, but I'm talking rocks the sizes of houses, you know, being pulled away from the face. So, yeah, like everything, you know, it's the person who's working at the face really that is at the hard line. Yeah, so I'm sure there's lots of stories there. Yeah. And what do they do with these holes? You know, we don't create houses in them. You know, we don't make these quarries as some bijou, you know, special places to live. You know, they just more often just remain empty or fill up with polluted water.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's ecologically, yeah, geologically, that's another scenario. Did that answer your question?
Of course.
Yeah. So where do you get your marble if you want to work, if you want to sculpt, where do you get it from?
On the local stores, let's say, smaller amounts, but not the ones that
Not the
you
big-
can, not bigger ones. Then you
Okay.
have to know a guy that knows a guy that.
Yeah,
so
oh
that's
yes,
normally-
of course, yeah. You should always be born into a family of everybody. Electrician, plumber, builder, baker, yes, and that's you'll be fine then for the rest of your life. Yeah, I totally understand. Totally understand.
Any other comments, questions? You want to add anything? Ask anything? Thank you. Okay, yes.
Why did you decide to use rugs for your exhibition? Like, is it the industrial side or the historical side? How did it start?
These specifically.
You know, generally, like, what is your? Why
It's-
did you choose it?
It started with the Carnarvon Castle connection. So we started looking at the qualities of walls. So that one was a historical wall made from limestone. So we came to limestone in that way.
But why did you look at walls? Like, wow.
Actually, we
Is
talked
there-
about it, right, in the beginning?
It was a kind of a spatial, the tiny gallery that we were thinking about
Tiny.
was like to
It's as big as this room. The gallery
Yeah.
is just a little bit longer than this room.
and
And it's like that with the castle. You know. And people walk past it, but they're looking at the castle. You know, they're sort of
Yeah, the castle wall is so big and there's
Yeah.
just a narrow street between the gallery, which is tiny again. And there's this juxtaposition between the huge castle wall and a
Yeah.
small place of art, space of art.
So I love materials. Like anytime I'm coming at something, like I want to know what it's made out of, where it came from,
How does it
I
feel?
would do it. I studied ceramics in art school, so it's very like we learned about glaze chemistry and different clay bodies, where the different ingredients came from. I remember one time, like there was, I think it was feldspar, actually, that we just couldn't get for a month or so.
What is that again?
It's kind of like a fluffy feldspar. I don't remember. This is like
Okay.
15 years ago, but it was an important moment because something that we just needed and took for granted, just we couldn't get it for a month from the supplier. So we were all like suddenly obsessed with feldspar. We hadn't thought about it before.
Yeah.
So we like figured out what it was and where it came from, and it was, as a student, it was a very meaningful experience to kind of narrow, because we had thousands of ingredients there, we had everything. And just not to have something that you needed.
Which university?
Grand Valley State University in West Michigan in the States. So I've always kind of wanted to dig as deeply as possible into whatever material it is and know about it, understand its qualities, feel its weight, try to break it, try to put it back together, put something with it, mix it with something. It's just my way of understanding what it is. And kind of a due diligence too, I think, as an artist, to know. Because everything interesting comes out of the obtaining of that knowledge. Like you read a book that you think you're reading it for one reason, and then, you know, like you just learn some weird, seemingly unrelated fact about something else, and then it kind of alters the whole path of the project, and I love that journey.
Meandering.
And it's nice to be really specific, and then like limestone as a journey, not as a destination. So someone said, "Oh, but did you get the limestone?" I'm like, and we're like, "No, but neither did we waste days trying. Like that was the quest, but not the, you know, it's the direction that you head. You don't have to get there.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that would come back to budget, and we
Yeah.
talked about this.
The limitations.
Yes, the limitations. So if we had, so how inventive are you with your sculpture, not being able to access the material that you want?
Mm-hmm.
And how constricting would our exploration be if we had all the money in the world and just access just one thought? You know, what happened here at PASAJ was that not only did we walk in with nothing, but then we found things in the room itself that inspired activity, action, potential possibilities. So incorporating the limestone in thought to transpose onto the whole space upstairs.
The
Thanks for-
spoiler of the
Yeah.
walls. So
Yeah.
when we were doing, they were like, "Oh, spoiler, spoiler, spoiler!" So all of these found elements. So we were given like the remainders of the past artist in residence
Yeah.
stuff,
You use
which
those.
then we kind of packed into our wall sculpture, and then we took the tiles, and so the idea of contemporary spoiler also played a big part in it, out of necessity and concept. So it was a nice marriage
Yeah.
of like, well, we don't have anything else actually, and wow, it really fits.
Thank you for your presence in and contribution to PASAJ, Small Things Residency.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
for
us.
your time, and thank you for your project, your performance as well. Thank you.